So now this is the most exciting part of putting the components together, which is the assembly part. So I have the acrylic ring prepared and ready. So the acrylic ring is here, and then there is OHP sheet also in, and then there is the board underneath, and you have a detailed lesson on how we set the ring, prepare the ring for the layering. Okay, and here I have the Oreo butter cake, and that is the eggless version, and this is the version with the egg. I'm going to tote both, so you could just check the texture of the both. So let me just start with the eggless, and you can see it is quite firm, and then you can see the condensation is happening on top of the cling wrap. Okay, so that is what we need. So it's been thawing out for about half an hour after about freezing time of overnight. You don't want to remove the cling wrap before the condensation is complete, because the water droplets are just going to be on top of the sponge. Okay, and then it is going to change the texture. So right now, because it doesn't have any dough, I'm just going to go find the half here. Okay, and just hold the knife straight without changing its position. While the knife is not gone in fully, just keep turning, and then have the cut mark join, after which you put the knife in. So this side of the knife also is within the mark, and then you keep turning the sponge, and that way that will help you to have a leveled toting. Okay, so that way you have the beautiful Oreo butter cake, and that is the version for the eggless. Now I'm just going to again tote this into two, and then you can do this toting and making thin layers only if the sponge is quite firm. So you can't be just working when the sponge is in room temperature or freshly out of the oven. So you can see I'm just turning the sponge, and that will just help you to have flat layers. Okay, so you can just check the texture of the sponge, and then this is the thinnest layer that you can use, and that is more important because we just want the proportion of the filling and the frosting to be not too much of cake in the layers. So I prefer having the sponge toted into 4 layers like the one that I have right now. So I'm just going to put the eggless sponge aside. Just kept the eggless sponge aside, and then I'm just going to start opening up the sponge that was made with eggs. You can see there is a bit of dough. So first thing, I'm just going to get rid of the dough a bit. So it's the same way as toting. The knife is not going in fully until I have the cut mark join, after which the knife will go in. Okay, so we have this butter sponge in egg ready. So I'm just going to first cut it into 2, and then each of them I'm just going to further cut it out into 2, and then have 4 layers for me. you can observe, as much as I am marking the outline with a knife, the knife wouldn't go inside fully after the knife marking is done, and that is when I am just passing the knife through in to have 4 beautiful layers of the sponge that we made, and then we'll just be ready to layer them in the rings now. So I'm just going to set these prepared sponges aside, get the acrylic ring prepared. So that is the lightened Oreo buttercream that I have. I'm just going to snip it open, and I'm going to add in buttercream at the base a bit for the sponge to stick and then not move. So now I just need to be inserting the sponge. So certain times with the ring that we are using, if the size of the sponge is a little bigger, we just can cut out on the sides a bit. So now the sides of the sponges have been trimmed out a bit. So I'm just going to add one sponge all the way in, and then I'm just going to make a dam. I just want to snip it open a bit bigger. Just always start with the dam, even if you're going to use the same for the filling, like how we are going to use now. So one layer is done. I'm just going to make sure there are no gaps in between the piping I made. So however close I did pipe, I'm just making sure. And then on top of that, I'm going to send in the next sponge. And then to that, I'm going to start with the dam layer. Just filling up all the gaps, and then again use the spatula to just make it even, so you again don't have any gaps in between the piping that was done. Then now goes the third layer of the sponge. Start with the dam. So I'm just using the spatula to smooth it out again. And then we have one last sponge to go in, and then the top. So this acrylic ring setting in the rings like this needs to freeze properly before we are able to remove the ring and then frost. So the top layer, again, you just don't want it to be drying out. The exposure of the sponge to room temperature should be like extremely minimum. Toting and then layering should be just very close to each other. The timing, you shouldn't just allow that toting part and then layering part, and leaving the sponge exposed in room temperature is just going to dry out your sponge. And so this top layer can be the top layer of the cake itself even after frosting. Only the sides we'll have to frost, and then the top we could just smooth out after we are just taking it out of the ring. So now this way this is just going to stay intact. And now the setting of the layers is done at the moment, and then I'm just going to cling wrap this entire thing, because you also don't want to let any moisture leaking out. I just want the whole thing to be entirely airtight, because I'm just going to put it in the freezer overnight, or at least about 4 hours before we are ready to frost the cake. I'm just going to wrap this whole thing together with the board as well. We'll just seal the entire thing, and then this is good to go into the freezer, and then I'll get back to show you how to remove the ring and then frost this cake. So the cookies and cream cake that we had laid in the acrylic ring is been freezing overnight, and then it's just out for about an hour. So I'm just going to remove the cling wrap and then frost and finish this cake. Okay, so now we need to remove this acrylic ring out. We also have the OHP sheet in. So we just slide it out. So because the OHP sheet, it just kind of comes out easily. So just go and find the part where we have stuck. So you could wash this OHP sheets to reuse for another cake if you're going to use the same size. Okay, so we have the layers here intact, and I also have the same Oreo buttercream. So I'm just going to start applying the cream on the sides. And then a bit on the top, because the ones that we already added is kind of firm at the moment. So I'm just going to use a scraper to just smooth out. and then a bit on the top with the offset spatula. So this is just a rough finish. We could just spend some more time to decorate. We could also pipe on the top and then keep the Oreo biscuits whole, or you could also use the mini Oreo biscuits, especially for the cookies and cream cake. The bigger ones you could just chop them and then use on the top, or you could use the mini Oreos. To just leave out the top hanging like that. If you're not going to look at finishing it with sharp edges, you could just clean the board and then we are good to go. I have some bigger Oreos here to go on top. So if you're going to pipe on top, then you could use the broken Oreos to just place on top. I just want to finish it simple to just have a simple arrangement of the Oreo cookies. So there you have the beautiful, simple looking cookies and cream cake that we've just made. So I'm just going to cut this cake out to check the layers.